If you spent any time in Foxhole's Discord, the subreddit, or game chat, you've probably seen some version of this argument. The Colonial X is better than the Warden Y, and the devs need to fix this. The replies are always the same, people screaming past each other, nobody changing their mind. But buried in that chaos, there's a take I see come up a lot that I want to address directly. And it goes something like this. The game would be better if both factions had the same stats. If Colonial X and Warden Y were identical, just make it symmetrical. And honestly, I get why people feel that way. But I think it's wrong. Not completely wrong. There's something real behind it. But if you actually followed that logic to its conclusion, you would gut the thing that makes Foxhole worth playing. Why does identity matter? I'm a tank player. That's one of the main things that pulled me into this game. And part of what keeps me here is that the tanks actually feel different and unique from each other. I like the Outlaw for its range and mobility. I like the Spatha because it's the most tank. It doesn't dominate in any category. It just does everything. It feels like a bland, boring tank, and I love that. Now, imagine both of those get flattened in the same vehicle. The same stats, the same purpose, same armor, gun, just a different paint job. Where's the excitement in capturing an enemy Spatha? Where's the curiosity about what the other side can do? It's gone. The faction you pick would just be aesthetic, just for the color. And Foxhole would be a lesser game for it. Asymmetry is a load-bearing thing. It has to be there. It's a core pillar. The question isn't whether the factions should be different, it's where and how. So, what does asymmetric design actually mean? Well, Foxhole is, by design, an asymmetric game. The Wardens and Colonials are not supposed to be mirror images of each other. And if you played both sides, you would know that. Wardens tend to be the more defensive faction, leading heavily into dug-in, heavy armor, precision, and specialization, while the Colonials lean into a more generalization of their gear and equipment, being a more offensive faction. And that division of identity is genuinely fun. Where players go wrong, and where I think the developers sometimes go wrong too, is how they think about which elements need to be symmetric and which ones get to be asymmetric. Because here's the thing, balancing a game like Foxhole isn't about making sure either faction is overpowered. It's about figuring out for every single piece of content whether it belongs in the symmetric bucket or the asymmetric bucket, and then executing on that correctly. In some cases, Foxhole absolutely nails it. In others, it just doesn't. And understanding that difference is the whole point to this argument. You cannot make a game like Foxhole without both. Let me start with what I'd call core content. These are the things that have to be symmetric for Foxhole to work, or close enough to it. They are the foundation that everything is built on. The best example is trucks, haulers, the pillar of logistics. They might vary slightly, a little more health, a little more speed, but they're functionally identical. And that's for a good reason. Logi is the spine, the backbone of this game. If one faction had a structurally superior hauler, the entire economy of the game would tilt. You can't have that. The game just wouldn't work. The same goes for early armored cars, early field anti-tank guns, the entry-level tools that both sides use to get established. These need to be mirrored. They need to be exact copies. And the devs have done a fantastic job at doing that. Sure, they're boring, they're identical, but you won't know that, and you won't know that because they're so integral to the early stages of the war. You won't care, you won't notice. That's a good symmetrical design. Small differences, maybe. Same core purpose. They filled their job perfectly. Both sides can do the job right. And then how do you do asymmetric correctly? What does good asymmetric design look like? A good example, take the upgraded field guns, the Rampart and the Smelter. These are both steps ups from the early versions. They have the same health, the same range. On the stat cards, they look almost identical, but the shell types tell a different story. The Smelter fires high velocity 40mm. It's a well-rounded ammo type. damages both vehicles and structures. And while it does do more damage than the Rampart, it has a lower pin chance against vehicles. So against tank lines, your rounds are going to bounce more, whilst the Rampart fires 68, which means it's basically only good against vehicles, but that's where it excels. Its pin chance is exceptional, leading to higher chances of track disables, turret disables, and pinning tank armor. Now you can make an argument about this, but that's fine. That's your opinion. I would say that neither is strictly better. They fill different roles, they reward different tactics, and crucially, you could argue that the strategic counterpart of each one exists somewhere else in each faction's toolkit. That design works, but maybe that one's a little far-fetched, right? The different ammo types, maybe that's too much. So let me give you a second example. The Kreneska and the Devitt Kane. These are both upgrades from their faction's early light tanks, but they evolve in different directions. The Kreneska gets lighter and faster with a slightly more health. It becomes a flanking tank, something you use to poke the edges of the enemy line, whilst the Devitt Kane goes the other way. It gets heavier armor, built to brawl in the center. Two different answers to the question of what a light tank upgrade should become. Both are valid, both are very fun to play, and both are interesting. That is an example of good asymmetric design done right. So, what's an example of bad asymmetric design? Submarines. Two completely different submarines, with neither faction getting a direct counterpart to what the other side has. The Wardens get an attack submarine. Colonials get a cruiser submarine. And the problem isn't just that they're different, it's that the Colonials' cruiser submarine is balanced like an attack submarine, when it shouldn't be. Think about what a cruiser submarine is supposed to be. It's large, it is meant for extended operations, long distances, and sustained presence. And we see that with the ability to take in pallets of torpedoes anywhere. It only has 10 more minutes of fuel capacity, which for a vessel supposedly built for range is basically nothing. Its crush depth is almost identical until a very recent patch, which gave it 5 extra meters of depth, which is not very meaningful. It also carries the same amount of torpedoes than the attack submarine. It's an attack submarine wearing a cruiser's coat, or I should say size, and it's worse at being an attack submarine than an actual attack submarine. And the fix that people usually ask for is to balance them closer together. And I understand that instinct, and while sure that may be the easier fix, I actually think the right direction is the opposite. Lean into that asymmetry. Make the cruiser submarine feel like a cruiser. Give it the range, the capacity, the storage to be that role. Don't balance them to the same value, balance them to their own correct value. The problem isn't that they're different, the problem is that one of them isn't what it's supposed to be. And yes, the Colonials should get their own attack submarine and the Wardens their own cruiser submarine. So the submarine problem is both a problem about the second failure mode is related but distinct. Releasing asymmetric content without giving the other faction a counterpart. And if you played Year 1 of Navy, you would know that. When Airborne dropped, then the Wardens got the Scout torpedo plane, which in my eyes is a core piece of content. It's a pillar. Something powerful enough to shape how an entire engagements play out. The Colonials got nothing, comparable for 4 months. 4 months. That's not asymmetric design. That's just one faction having something the other faction doesn't, with no counterplay built around it. No counterpart. Now obviously, a new colonial equivalent is coming, but the damage is already done. And it raises the question, at what point in development do you ask whether the other faction needs a counterpart before you ship? And look, I don't think the answer is always give both factions the exact same content, the same plane. The Colonial Fleet Carrier and the Warden Seaplane Tender are a actually fantastic example of asymmetric design that works. They're different platforms with different operational philosophies. Both work. If both factions had tight counterparts for every plane type, both had identical dive bombers and torpedo bombers and scout planes. But the Wardens leaned slightly towards seaplane operations and the Colonials leaned toward carrier-based operations. That makes the game more interesting. You could even give Colonials a few seaplanes, and we do see that with how paratroopers are balanced. Instead of following the tradition, the Warden paratrooper plane is not a seaplane. You have to land on a runway, while the Colonial's paratrooper plane is actually a seaplane. Those small but noticeable shifts or uniqueness in what you could categorize as their design philosophy just makes things so interesting. It's that kind of nuance that makes good asymmetric design work. So here's where I land on all of this. The people who say Foxhole should be symmetrical are trying to solve real problems. The frustration of feeling like your faction is getting a worse deal, but they're reaching for the wrong solution. Full symmetry would kill what makes this game worth playing. But the answer isn't to just defend every asymmetric decision the devs make either. The answer is to have a clearer understanding for what should be symmetric and what should be asymmetric, and then actually executing on that consistently. We see time and time and time, again and again, where the devs do not make that. They fail to implement good balance between having symmetric and asymmetric content, in most cases, leaving one faction out to dry, and in some cases, leaving both factions out to dry. A good example, the torpedo bomber and dive bomber. So, the core pillars, symmetric. Near identical, non-negotiable. You can't. It just doesn't work. Faction-specific tools that fill different roles, different niches, that's asymmetric, but balanced to their own correct value. They serve some niche, not shoehorned into a role that they aren't designed for. The submarine. And when you release something powerful enough to shape the whole war, both factions need to have it. Maybe not an exact copy, but at least an answer to it. That's the standard, and it's worth holding Foxhole to it. Thank you to making it to the end of the video. Squad was a game I was incredibly passionate about, and to watch it go downhill into the dumpster fire that it is today hurt me. And to see Foxhole, a game I am truly passionate about, follow that same path, it hurts. Foxhole is an amazing and incredibly unique game, and to see it hurt over and over and over again every time by the same mistakes, it's painful to watch your favorite game slowly die. This is something I've tried to work on for almost a year now, and I've finally gotten around to a video that I'm happy with. Thank you for listening to my rant. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.